Hi there. It's September 23rd. We're continuing our journey through Paul's letter to the Ephesians, and we're in chapter 2, reading the whole chapter from verses 1 to 22. We've seen already in Ephesians that Paul has focused in on what Christ has done, and that it's in him that we have all of the benefits that God has brought for us, the salvation, the redemption. Everything is in him. Now, Paul starts off chapter 2 reminding his readers where they were at once we were lost, once we had nothing, once we were dead, in fact, in sins and failures, and we were on the wrong road, we were on the wrong path. And we all used to live according to the drives of our desires, of our physical bodies, without reference to the Spirit, because our spirits were dead. But God, says Paul, but God is rich in mercy. Remember, that's the nature that he revealed to Moses back in Exodus. He says, I am rich in hesed, I am rich in covenant grace, I am compassionate. And this God, who is rich in mercy, took us at that point where we were dead, and he restored us to life. He raised us up with Christ and made us sit with him in heavenly places. What does that mean? It means that Jesus was raised as a man, as a human being. He is God, but he's also human, and in his human flesh he has gone into the presence of the Father, and we are taken in with him, and we are now seated in heavenly places. Humanity is now seated with Christ in the Father's presence, so that Jesus is before the Father, pleading our cause, calling up us into that place as well. And he is showing us how amazing, how great his kindness is. This is not because of what we've done. Paul says this is all of his grace. This is all of the outcome of God's covenant. And just to say here that grace, this word in the modern Hebrew translation, is the word hesed. And it comes from this ancient word, this ancient Hebrew word that it's connected with, which is the obligation that comes from a covenant. And God has made this covenant, and it's his covenant grace, his covenant bond that is working out through Jesus. This is not a new element to God's character. This is the continuation of his hesed, of his grace, of his covenant bond with us. And this is God's gift. This is not what we do. This is not our initiative. It's his. And actually God has prepared good works, not so that we should get to God, but as an outflow of this grace that God is giving to us. Now, one of the things that this means, Paul says, is that this has ended the enmity that existed between God's ancient people, the Jewish people, the covenant people, and those who are not part of the covenant. Paul says once you were far away from God, once you were not citizens of heaven, once you didn't have access to the good things that God has given. But now, because of Messiah Jesus, he has broken down the division. He's broken down the enmity. He's broken down the wall, and he's made of these two factions one new person, one new man. There's a real sense of this coming together. This is what Jesus has done in his body. Now this promise for Israel, this blessing for all of the families of the earth that was promised to Abraham, is made available to all people because of the opening of the door through Jesus' death and resurrection. So God's desire to create all people together in Christ is being fulfilled. He is our peace. He is the one who brings this wholeness. He brings this fulfillment. He brings this coming together. Both those who were near through their being part of the original covenant, and those who seemed far away, those who were cut off. And so none of us are now divided into circumcision and uncircumcision or foreskin. We are now completely one in Jesus Christ. We are not foreigners and strangers, even though once we were without God and without hope in the world. Now we are fellow citizens with God's holy people. We are part of God's household. It's absolutely incredible, the joy that Paul has in this reality as he shares it. And Jesus himself is Paul calls him the cornerstone, the setting that everything else is built on, the foundation stone. And we, as his people, Jews and non-Jews, are together now being built into one living temple, one living body through the power of Jesus. What an amazing insight Paul has here into what Jesus has done and what God is doing through the grace, through the hesed love of God. He is pouring into his people, pouring into the world this opportunity for us to become new creations, the new creation God has intended for us. Have a very good September 23rd.